effective life, effective decision making, and many which ways in which we will make what we do more purposeful. We have with us our founder and chairman Anil Sachdev, who will inspire us with his ways of life, the way he has understood many facets of life that give meaning to us. uh, we have a set of eminent panelists from primarily the area of HR, of course, but other than that, rounded well, who would all be hosting it along with Anil, and I would be facilitating the conversation around. The questions that the audience and the host will generally wander around are to bring in insights about listening and observation, and how this actually enriches the way we work. And we would like to learn from life experiences. And Anil will be the pivot point from whom we will seek to understand how this actually works well for us in life. Let me take a moment to introduce our co-panelists and co-hosts with me. I have Ms. Rekha Nair, who is a seasoned HR leader with nearly 3 decades of experience across IT, manufacturing, banking, and consulting industries. She is the founder of Align HR and has previously led HR globally at Navis and Schneider Electric India. Rekha specializes in change management, inclusive leadership, coaching senior executives. Her work blends strategic HR vision with hands on transformation expertise. Welcome, Rekha. Uh, we have next Ms. Khurshid Kurodi. She is an Harvard alumnus with a rich global background across 4 countries and multiple disciplines. She currently serves as executive chairman of Shivya India and advises several global not for profit organizations. A trained classical musician, she uniquely blends leadership with the arts through her sessions on leadership lessons through music and the humanities for organizations such as Larsen and Toubro. She says the parallels between music and management are astounding. Welcome to the evening, Khurshid.
Thank you.
We next have Ms. Deepa Mahesh. Ms. Deepa Mahesh is a leadership facilitator, a certified coach, and a self mastery expert who enables ambitious leaders to achieve success with balance. With over 2 decades of corporate HR leadership experience, she integrates psychology, emotional intelligence, and embodiment practices to drive inside out transformation. A TEDx speaker and a multi passionate creative, Deepa's mission is to enable deep, sustainable transformation in individuals, teams, and organizations. Welcome,
Thank
Deepa.
you.
Once again, namaskar and good evening to everybody. And I hand it over to Anil for his opening remarks, and thereafter would invite my co-hosts along with all of us in the audience to delve deep on the subject of listening and observation.
समस्तजन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरु ब्रह्म विद्वरम्. I always begin all my sessions by expressing my gratitude to our spiritual teacher, the great Swami Chinmayananda. And I just want all of us to just take a moment to think about the people in your life who have impacted you the most, impacted each one of us, the people in our lives, people who we are feeling grateful to. And I'd like us to take a moment and silently thank them for what they have brought to our lives. The subject today is on communication. And listening and observation are extremely important part of communication. And I love to engage with your questions because I will learn from your questions as much as you will probably appreciate some of the responses I have. But I think the greatest fun I'll have today is actually knowing that even as you ask questions, perhaps you know more about the answer than I do. But, I would love to learn from your questions. So please go ahead.
May I invite Rekha to please give us her thoughts and what she would like to, have more in the conversation from Anil.
Sure. Thank you, Vidya. Thank you, Anil, for the setting the context for today's session. So my question to you, Anil, is around the relevance of listening and observing deeply. Um, in these times where leaders are rewarded for quick decisions, for constant visibility, and for instant answers, and in today's world where fast paced, everything is so fast paced, and people are bombarded with so many distractions, and the attention span of people is also becoming shorter and shorter. In this context, is it practical to practice deep listening and deep observation? Was my question to you.
So your question has three dimensions to it. One, that with premium being put on decision making and importance given to fast responses, and also with so many different factors contributing to distraction, what's the importance of listening and observation in this context? It's very interesting. Right from our childhood, in classroom, we are taught language. We are taught how to speak. Early on, we are taught on how to make presentations. As we grow older, we are taught about the importance of public speaking. There are organizations like Toastmasters which celebrate prowess in oratory. And we are impressed by when people make great speeches. And, many people we vote for in our government, in our politicians, based on the way they arouse emotions amongst the people. It was very interesting that we give a lot of premium on the way we speak, our mastery over words, tone, voice, impact. But I was asking myself, did anybody ever teach me how to listen? And when was the first lesson I got on listening? And it was not till I was much older that I was taught that this is how you might want to listen. But yes, I observed my teachers Swami Chinmayananda. I observed how he would be completely with you, even though there are hundreds of people if you are asking him a question. At that moment, for those few minutes, it was just you and him. Or I would see him early morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, his light would go on, and he would have all these letters in front of him, and he would be writing to every single devotee responses to the questions that they were asking him. So it was not just in presence by your oral communication, but even in written communication, it is as if he was paying attention to what is behind your question in the letter. And then something very deeply personal happened in my family, and my younger brother, who was doing some experiments in life. And one evening, I was in the next room. I heard a deep conversation between him and my elder sister that completely transformed his life. And I thought that was one of the finest examples I have seen of somebody listening without judgment. And much later, I met Vikram Lal in Aishar. He spent 2.5 hours in interviewing me, and he spoke maybe for 5% of the time, or not even 5%. He was genuinely interested in this 23.5-year-old person that he was trying to hire into Aishar. And I think he's probably the finest listener I have met in my life. And I was just deeply, deeply impacted by these lessons on listening, because I thought these people whom I observed were not just observing to what was obvious, things like expression in your eyes, things like your body language, things like your energy. but they were really understanding you very deeply as a person. And I said, even 5 minutes of deep listening has such a profound impact on the person whose voice has been heard, that it completely transforms a person. Just this afternoon, I was sitting at lunch with a student whom I had always noticed sitting all by herself. And I just sat down for a few minutes next to her to try to understand who she is and where she comes from. And it's really, really intriguing that when you listen deeply and observe deeply, you learn so much about the others, about the people. And it's not just paying attention to the other person, it is paying attention to the entire field. For example, when you are in a team, you're observing the energy of the team, you're observing why somebody is very quiet today, why somebody is being so distracted today. And I have noticed that by paying attention to people and the environment, you learn a lot more. And when you are trying to only express and you are trying to impress, so express and impress is something that we are taught with the power of expression, the power of how to influence people through the way we speak. But this dimension I thought was so extraordinarily important that I realized that this needs to be part of our curriculum from early childhood education on how to listen and how to appreciate and how to understand. So these are just my opening comments. And I'll come back to your question, Rekha, because why is there premium on speaking more and acting decisively? Let's examine that. See, the so-called business management it originated in United States. In the culture in United States, young children at a very young age are asked to leave home and fend for themselves. From a very young age, children are told, because you have to be independent. Now, even if you clean my car, as my father, I'll give you $1 for cleaning my car because you have to earn your pocket money. And children are told from a very young age how to express themselves, how to look after themselves, and how to, in that sense, communicate with impact. So you will see small kids in America speaking very confidently. And when I first went to United States on a Rotary scholarship, and I was lecturing at the high schools, I found young children with so much confidence that if they had so much knowledge, but the way they were expressing it made it appear as if they knew a lot more. And then I saw our shy Indian children struggling to find their voice with so much of competition in the classroom and having so deep knowledge, but hesitating to express themselves. So I think this whole Western paradigm and American upbringing, which has a profound impact on the way business is run. And therefore, we are taught courses on marketing and branding and how to market yourself, how to brand yourself, how to communicate with impact, all that. So I think it's a part of the business leadership program that we run. We teach something like executive presence, which says we should be able to hold the attention of everybody in a short period of time. We talk about making pitches, and so that you earn your venture capital, you have only 2 minutes to make the so-called elevator pitch, which is a typical American concept, right? In 2 minutes, convince me, should I put $100,000 as your angel investor? So this whole premium, which have originated from that country, which everybody else in the world has emulated for whatever reason. And if you look at the United States and the model of capitalism, people in United States themselves will tell you that one of the biggest reasons why, for example, 70% of the marriages fail in America, for instance, is because people say, I want to move on. I understand where you are from. I understand where I am from. And I think there is no meeting point. So let's move on. The ability to endure, the ability to understand, the ability to try to build a deeper relationship beyond the transaction. So I think even my best friends in America challenge themselves and question themselves that this understanding of quick responses, quick decisions, where has it led the society to? And is this the society, is this the model of capitalism that we wanted to build, which resulted in in deep divisions, resulted in deep divides, and some significant conflicts. Like because of that reason, therefore, many ills in society were born. Now, of course, there are many positives in America, which we can come about that. There are so many things we can learn. But I just wanted to build why in this decisiveness angle that you talked about, what, in my opinion, was the origin and the history, and why that was so dominant in our business conversations.
Thank you, Anil.
That was
Shall we take
indeed
more time or
nice.
should I pass on?
I think you can just ask another question if it is related to the same. I think we'll have a connecting question also. Yeah.
Sure. So, Anil, back to today's times where, the culture is where we celebrate reacting over reflecting. And what is your advice to young leaders? How can they make listening and observing deeply a real lived practice when around us we see whether it is the social media part of it or anywhere else, there's so much of reaction that is happening all the time. So, how can we practice more mindfulness? How can we practice to be more present, to think deeply, to listen deeply, to observe deeply? That is my second question to you.
There are four aspects that I would like to emphasize here. The first, we have to first learn to listen to ourselves. See, there is this whole epidemic globally on well-being, and particularly emotional and mental well-being. This is because a lot of people, even though they are 24 by 7 connected through their devices to others, but they are feeling very alone. It's because they are not taking time to spend time with themselves, what I call solo time. I encourage many of my students to say you should fix up dates with yourself. Your calendars are so full, so they say, this is my date with myself. Yeah. I'm going to spend this hour a week in just spending time with myself without any pressure, without any task, without anything to be achieved. So what will I do? That is the quiet time, solo time. I need to understand myself better, understand which point this week I was feeling particularly inspired, what has got me down, why am I getting this kind of negative emotion in my heart, where is that coming from, why are some people causing more irritation to me than they should, why am I identifying with negatives in some people, what does that teach me about myself. This kind of conversation, which is what we call me time. And me time is not just I will watch my favorite movie and I'll watch my favorite cricket show, for example. But me time is just quiet time, solo time with myself. And particularly, especially if it's in nature. You know, if you have a park nearby and you go for a walk by yourself and you learn from what's happening in nature, these are some extremely important things. The third, deliberately make an attempt to create a circle of people from whom you can learn, from whom you would like to get, let's say that, with whom you would like to create space to explore different things that are important to you. I'll give you a very interesting story. I and, some of my colleagues like Prasad Kaipa, Dinesh Chandra, we used to host these transformational leadership workshops. And we did a few of them in Pataudi, not too far from Delhi. Something very unusual about Pataudi, it's a large Muslim-dominated area. Yet, Pataudi has never had any communal rights. Whether it was Babri Masjid or it was 1947 India's partition. And it has got comparatively some very nice Hindu-Muslim amity. A few kilometers away, we have Nu, where we have had trouble, but not Pataudi. And why? So we would encourage our participants to go early morning for walk to the villages nearby and to talk to the people. So they would see the villagers are sitting in a circle and many of them are sharing a hookah and they are talking to each other. So people came back and said they talked to them as to what is unique about their community. And they said, villagers said, in our community, we don't lock our houses. It's all open. We look after each other. Then one old man said, this is because we sit in a circle regularly and we share a hookah. He just gave that as an answer. I was very intrigued by this. And, many years back, we had done a program of the global board of our global leadership program, where all the heads of leadership development and HR came to United States. And we spent 3.5 days with the leaders of the Hopi tribe in the desert of America. There we spent in down deep in the valley near the, which is also the one which leads to the Grand Canyon. We sat down with them in a circle, and there were these elders of the village. There were three generations: the grandfather, the father, the son, in fact, fourth generation, a little baby as well. And they lit a fire, and they were holding conversations with each other. And the Hopi tribe has this very interesting, they have a talking stick concept. You may have heard of this, that as long as one person is speaking, you have the talking stick in your hand. Even if you're silent, if you're holding the stick, it means you still want to say something. And then they move on the stick to the other person. They were saying to us something quite remarkable. They said, let's take time to listen to the whole. We said, what is meant by that? They said, when I was sitting there, suddenly one scorpion, big scorpion came near my foot. And I was getting scared. That grand old man, who must have been 90, 95, he looked at me and he just signaled, it's okay. And he said, welcome. This is also the guest. Don't react. Listen to the whole. And a little child in the group, he said, the child wants to speak. So he said, let him also speak. His voice must be heard. Then he said, can you hear the animals in the distance? They said, today our people have done some hunting and brought this kill. He said, in our community, we eat one portion of it amongst ourselves. We cook the other portion, we leave it out for the other animals because we share with them. So this concept that is called, which is also very prevalent in places like our own Pataudi, in our villages, in our ancient time, we used to sit in a circle, light a fire, and talk deeply from our heart. This is what is called, my dear friend Daniel Christian Wall, who is one of the wonderful ecologists and who works for the nature. He calls it the power of counsel, on how do you listen deeply to each other in ways that really make people open up. In organizations, we miss this because we don't create places for community. We don't create places for people to open up and really express what's their deepest aspiration or what is bothering them. We always talk about the next product launch, the next budget review, but we don't create space for people where they can truly open up to themselves. So I think spending solo time, listening to yourself, creating a circle, listening deeply to each other, and really learning from nature, and always paying attention to the whole, not just human beings, but the entire whole. I think this is a profound way of learning and deeply listening, which is far beyond the conventional listening that we are taught.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you for the beautiful response. Such a comprehensive, uh, you know, things that you spoke about. Thank you so much. Back to you, Vidya.
Thank you so much, Rekha, for this question to provoke such important thoughts and the kinds of words that we get to write and now go and visit to learn more. The power of counsel and the listening to the whole, the talking stick, and these are things that we listen and we hear, of course. But I think we now need to go back to work more on that. And on this point, I now invite Deepa for her set of questions and how she would like to elicit more on this subject from Anil.
So the question I had is also coming from the audience. I see Anil Gruber write the same question. So I was curious about what shifts have you noticed? And because you're a wonderful storyteller, we would love to listen to anecdotes on when leaders have consistently listened and practiced deep observation. How has it shifted team culture, team dynamics? Very similar is what Anil is also asking.
There are some very active listeners. I would call person like Anand Mahendra as an active listener. I think Prince Augustine is in the room. There are persons like deep listeners, and I will call deep listeners people like Vikram Lal of Aisha. I would call Mr. Muthuraman of Tata Steel as a very deep listener. These are truly deep listeners. Now, when people practice this and encourage to practice, I will not take the name of a client, but we were about to do a large project with a very well-known global technology firm. And the CEO had called the top 30 people for us for the kickoff meeting of this program. Then there was one senior HR guy in that company who was probably not happy that we had been hired for this project. And he was trying to, let's say, challenge some of our methodology by pulling our leg and trying to make us look a bit. So the CEO looked at him, looked at what he was trying to do, looked at his body language, perhaps understood. But I was quite surprised by his response. In the whole meeting, he told that person, they don't play games. It doesn't matter what your understanding of this approach is or the model is. Let's not have any BS here in this room. You know? And everybody burst out laughing, including the person himself. So he just called it like that because he had such high respect amongst his people and he was such an authentic leader that he called it out. And because he was listening very deeply and saw this game being played, and he could observe what was exactly going on in the room. Because I thought maybe it's proper for him to challenge us because we are new partners and it's okay for people to challenge and we will explain our methodology. But he could understand it that there was a game being played here and he immediately called it out. After that, the entire defensiveness in the room and the tension in the room disappeared. And everything became a much more authentic conversation because the CEO chose to call it out. I'll give another example. See, if you look at, Mr. Muthuraman, for example, when we were launching this whole succession planning process in Tata Steel, he chose to spend an evening with me, with Mr. Ratan Tata and Dr. Jamshed Irani. We were all there in Goa in one of the Tata conferences. And the way he included Mr. Muthuraman, Mr. Ratan Tata into the process, Dr. Jamshed Irani, who was a senior in the process, and the way he was including them into this idea that we are going to do another talent appreciation process was something quite remarkable. The way he was listening to his predecessor, the way he was listening even to his concerns in his mind, the way Mr. Ratan Tata was asking me a question, saying, can creativity be developed? He was saying. He was telling me, in my opinion, people are born with creativity. And I was trying to explain to him that is not necessarily the case. But the kind of how Mr. Muthuraman managed to orchestrate that conversation was something quite remarkable, actually. And that evening in Goa, I remember that as a great piece of, in a very simple, unassuming way. Mr. Muthuraman had this very humble style of leadership in which he would just make people feel very much at ease. So these are some incidents, and what I've noticed most about people who change the conversation in the room by their deep listening is they are not afraid to say they don't know. They have complete confidence in the power of the team and power of inclusive approach to leadership. They are very willing to be vulnerable, and they are very willing to also call it out that if they see something is dysfunctional happening in the group, they are able to call it out in a way which doesn't hurt the other person, but makes it clear to people as to what's going on. And I think these are some very, very unique examples I have seen of how people have worked. Anand Mahindra is a very, very interesting listener. Prince can talk to you more about it, but the way he just absorbs what's the question, the way he understands people, the way he connects it to an alternate thought in his mind, which comes from his own creative mind, is also something very, very wonderful that one has observed in interacting with him.
That
In
was
fact, the Prince has asked any difference between active and deep listening, because you started off with active listening.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Yeah, active listening is paying attention to what's going on between all of you right now and really actively understanding where you're coming from. But deep listening is going much beyond. I will use my mentor Vikram Lal's words. He would say, "Bhav और भावना के बीच अंतर नहीं होना चाहिए." What does that mean? Bhav and bhavana. What is visible and what is the deep intent behind? What you are speaking and what you are deeply meaning by that. Active listeners pay a lot of attention to what you are speaking and where you are coming from. Deep listening is about even understanding some of the things you yourself have not said but which are bothering you from deep inside. And that is a great gift. I, of course, find many spiritual teachers have that. They are able to straight look into your eyes and look into your soul, and they know exactly what is bothering you. And they have that gift to understand exactly what's going on. But the active listeners are very skillful, engaged listeners who pay complete attention to every word, whereas deep listeners go beyond that.
yeah.
Thank you. Over
Deepa,
to
you
you.
have any more questions to
Over
Anil?
to you.
Okay, thank you so much. That was, I think, very thought provoking indeed, and it resonated with so many questions on the chat box here from the audience as well. I'll take a couple of threads from the chat questions and add my own to them. I have Prince's question here, Dr. Prince Augustine, saying that from the movie The Last Samurai, how do ordinary people pick the skill of simultaneous listening? And whereas listening is not just listening by the ear, but it is whole listening. And similar to this, I have an extended question. Like the dialectic method or the Guru Sishya Parampara, where oratory traditions have been in vogue. We never learnt by writing notes. I think somewhere what we listened stayed with us, and we learned to listen as a person. And what do you think of this kind of listening, especially for academic learning, maybe in a classroom or in a training setup?
See, there are three different dimensions to it. In a classroom, every student is unique, and every student's inclination to learn is different, and every student's style of learning is different. Some are very curious about listening to your words, some are observing you, some are trying to understand, make sense out of your stories. Some have read something on the subject which you have encouraged them to do, which is not easy for people these days. Readers have become lesser and lesser, but people have that. Now, when you are paying attention to that, and for a teacher to understand and appreciate each student from the unique background the person has, the unique style of learning the person has, and what's going on and what's most important to the student. Now, this calls for, I think it's quite an extraordinary thing that if some teachers are able to understand every student in the class, I would say that requires a very special gift for you to do that. If not in the first few classes, then at least over time. If you are able to appreciate every student in your class, it requires very deep understanding. See, I have a dear friend who's no more. Her name is Anne Stadler, who used to live in Seattle, and her colleague, a friend called Mark Jones. And Mark Jones wrote this very wonderful piece, which he also gave to His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He said every human being has got three basic human wants and needs, where wants and needs meet. One is the wanting and the need to be seen, the wanting and the need to be listened to, and the wanting and the need to be appreciated. So he called it SH or SLA. SLA is also service level agreement, but this is to be seen, to be listened to, and to be appreciated. And he said, if you remember these three principles, but remember some people they appear differently, that means you are able to understand that this person has this very cynical expression on the face. What does that mean? This other person has always a smile on the face, even though there is no need to smile. Where does that come from? There is this other person who has got a smirk. There is this person who is always very fidgety. Now, what does this mean in the way they want to be seen and appreciated? What's the kind of recognition that people are looking for, and what kind of listening are they wanting you to do? I think understanding this about people and where they are coming from. There is this beautiful Hindi song that क्यों इतना मुस्कुरा रहे हो, क्या गम है जिसको छिपा रहे हो. Huh? That sometimes somebody is smiling, but actually very sad inside. And for us to understand that this person is actually going through a period of deep grief, and yet the person is making it on and trying to. It happens to some people go through, they have a loss of a dear and near one, but instead of grieving, they are making everybody else, they're consoling everybody else who's coming. And it's only when everybody is gone that they really sit down and they go through the period of grief when they have lost somebody dearly dear to them. So to understand what kind of life stages people are going through, to understand where they are coming from, to understand their context, and to understand what is it that they are both having in life and missing in life, I think this requires very deep understanding of people, and you have to really enjoy people to be able to appreciate where they are coming from, and you really have to believe in human potential for a teacher to be able to say that I'm not giving up even on one single student. To take that approach to say I'm not willing to give up even on one student, no matter how difficult that student is, I think that requires very strong belief in human potential. And I think, therefore, when you are having that potential and that belief in that potential, then your listening and observation becomes very different from what it is conventionally there. Most of us have limits, and most of us put limits on what is we are willing to go along with, and beyond which what is not acceptable in today's world. And most people, we give up once that when we have 3 performance ratings in organization of a certain rating, and we put the person through what we call PIP, performance improvement plan, and then we justify saying now it's a time to part company. So all that comes from this kind of an approach, which is very different.
I think that's actually the test of a good teacher, if I would say, because to make a difference to somebody by taking what you just said, to have those gifts or at least cultivate, that makes a difference to some students' life a long way. Anil, another question, quick question, based on some threads that I see here in the chat box. How would you help us identify any biases from the way we observe or the way we listen, because both are interrelated?
I'll give the so-called science-based answer. And one of my dear colleagues, Visti Banaji of Tata's, his cousin who is at Harvard University, her name is Professor Banaji, is probably one of the world's topmost researchers and thinkers and writers on biases, Professor Banaji. So she will respond based on the science of what biases are about, both conscious biases and unconscious biases. Conscious bias, that I know that I have a problem dealing with people who are gay, for example. I am conscious of that. But unconscious biases, I didn't even know that I was objecting to have a woman as my boss, because somewhere at a deep level inside, I was intimidated by a female leader for whatever reason. And I was not conscious of the fact that why was I objecting to this new structure in the company where I would be reporting to a female boss. And I had never seen it that way. But then I realized that there is an unconscious bias I have about it. But I'll turn this to a very deeply spiritual discussion. In the Indian spiritual thought, we say that some of these biases may be as a result of many of your past lives. We call it prarabdha. So sometimes you meet somebody and you like that person for no reason. You met the person for the first time. And sometimes you take a dislike for a person for no reason. First meeting. This is many times because of the what we are carrying as past life tendencies into this life. Sometimes that person in the past life was in an adversarial relationship with us, or in a very deep, personally gratifying relationship with us. So likes and dislikes sometimes are born out of that. You know, in pranayama, in the breathing method that we are taught, and which we covered also briefly in the last class, this whole aspect of saying that we should take a pause before we respond in a situation. We normally react. This pause, which is necessary for us to create understanding, is something which can completely change the relationship and the conversation. Like I had mentioned earlier, many of the wars today are because we don't take this pause, because we don't have the opportunity to really understand the some biases are carrying on from generation to generation. We hear stories in Kashmir about the Kashmiri Pandits and how the people in the valleys treated them. And it carries on. We hear stories about the partition of India, the Hindu Muslim riots, and families carry on giving biases. So we have to be very clear that many of these biases we carry even from many times past lives. So we need to be very careful. And of course, there are the usual. You can, if you go to psychology today, it will give you 14 biases: the confirmation bias, the Kruger-Denning effect, the confirmation bias, the decline bias, the in-group bias, and so on and so forth. There are many technical terms for biases. But rather than go into that, which, by the way, in the self-leadership class with students we explore in greater detail, I will only say this: be very observant of why are you either reacting or responding in a particular way, and where is that coming from? And hold on, particularly when the situation is one of creating significant conflict in yourself, and you are finding it very difficult to respect somebody else's viewpoint on a subject. Be very, very, very aware of where this is coming from and do some deeper work before you take any decisions. Or sometimes the quietest person in the room has the best answer. But because we have not given the person an opportunity to speak, and we have kind of ignored the most powerful voice in the room, which is the most powerful voice is the silent person. And we really need to pay attention to this dimension. But
I think that's one reason why we say silence is gold, or silence speaks louder than words. Maybe at this note, maybe I'll invite Kushid
so,
to join in with her question.
yes, thank you,
Hi.
Krushi.
Yes, hi Anil. What a lovely transition, Vidya. Thank you. We talked earlier, albeit with a different vocabulary, about the difference between hearing and listening. So, in the interest of time, we'll move on to my second question. I grew up from a very, very young age in classical music schools. So, auditory skills were drilled into me probably before I could even walk properly or run properly. Um, and musicians spend an extraordinary amount of time alone with their instruments, practicing. And we have to listen really deeply to the resonance of each note. Our vocabulary starts young with words like harmony, resonance, rhythm, the basic heartbeat without which we can't survive. So I want to ask you, we also, in time to come, as some become soloists, orchestral musicians, have relationships that are distinctly tacit with the score in front of us, with the composer, with the music, with the people in our section, strings or brass, with the orchestra as a whole, and then with the conductor who doesn't speak for the entire length of the concert. Everything is done with a baton. So I wanted to tell you that lay the foundation of a world in music and say that one of the things that we learned early is that we have a rest between notes in many compositions, in all compositions. And we say that the music is not in the notes, but in the silence between the notes. Could you elucidate upon that a little bit? And then maybe just give me a minute for the last question, which I'll bring in after we hear from you on this idea.
What an extraordinary question, Khurshid. And I think it's really a truly gift, this question is, because, see, all of learning takes place in the silence between two thoughts. We get exposed to something, we get stimulated by something, we are trying to make sense out of something. But it's only in the silence do we truly appreciate and understand what we have gone through. So we have a goal, then we have an experience, and then we have the silence. That silence is the one in which we reflect and we get meaning out of it, and that gives us the opportunity to learn something and to practice the next effort on our part to raise our game. If there was no silence, we would simply be in a mechanical way repeating. There are, in music, for example, in your solo, there are people who keep on repeating, they keep on working hard, they keep on practicing, and they are good musicians, but they are not great musicians.
Yeah.
Because in the great musicians, for example, my friend Aruna Narayan Kalle, who's probably the best sarangi player in the world, she's the daughter of Pandit Ram Narayan, who was the Padma Vibhushan, probably in his time, till he passed away recently, the best sarangi player. I've stayed at her home many times and I just listened to her riyaz.
Yeah.
And even when she's alone, the deep dedication with which she is continuously all her life, not just making effort, but herself understanding and learning from other musicians, not just her father, but from other people, from other disciplines of music, including she has played music with many top musicians who are Western musicians because she lives in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I think that ability to understand the finer nuances that always occur when the musician is paying attention not only to the experience and to the music, but to herself, then to the teacher, and then to the team with whom she is working. They said learning is a three-way process. The teacher is teaching you, you are learning from the teacher, and the learner is teaching the teacher what method of teaching is helping the person to learn. And the two are in a symbiotic relationship. For example, the Sanskrit word Upanishad means two people sitting in dialogue.
Yeah.
The teacher and student are in a dialogue. That is the meaning of the word Upanishad. So, because learning is a three-way process, and particularly in music, when there are multiple players, the orchestra leader, and who is so paying attention to every single person's movement and intent, and none of us can even make out that somebody has not been on the top of a game, but the conductor knows exactly what is going on, because the person is noticing things which are visible and invisible. In my leadership class, I often do something very interesting. I tell students to think of an incident in their life which has had a very profound impact on them. Then I ask them to form pairs, and I say to them, now share your story about this incident without speaking a single word, only through your eyes. So they start laughing. They said, it's not possible. I said, now, believe me, hold your judgment. Try communicating only through your eyes. And later on they come and say, they said, sir, we never understood the power. 80% of what my colleague was saying, I could get just through the eyes. And in the second simulation, I asked them to use eyes as well as body language. And in the third simulation of the same incident, I asked them to now use their voice. And they come back and say, the voice added only 10%. We got most of it just by eyes and expressions. And, we have a lot to learn from musicians. We have a lot to learn from orchestra conductors, because the whole notion of a leader being an orchestra conductor is such an amazing metaphor to learn from, because the real harmony, the real rhythm. But I'll say something else to you, which I learned from Dr. Deepak Chopra, who had come when Swami Chinmayananda gave up his body. He came to talk to us and he gave a talk about his relationship with Swami Chinmayananda. He said, Anil, when people have that shared wavelength that they want to bring about some transformation in an organization, they begin to resonate at a new frequency together. They are in sync. They begin to resonate. And change management specialists sitting here call them the critical mass. But he says, I am a biologist originally and a doctor. He said in the words of physiology, we describe the cells by a beautiful word called imaginal cells. Imaginal cells. So he said in a caterpillar, when he's in a cocoon waiting to be born as a butterfly, the cells begin to vibrate at a new frequency. They come together and they call themselves the imaginal cells, because they can imagine the crescendo they will create when they lift their game and they go beyond knowing into the new birth that takes place when they become butterflies. So it's a very beautiful process, and I think I have had the great fortune of listening to some of the greatest musical performances where, in the presence of Swami Chinmayananda, I particularly remember some of the greatest musicians of our times perform in something called Bhakti Sandhya. So MS Subbulakshmi, she was staying in the president's house. We went to pick her up and she had 103 fever. And so the president's wife, Mrs. Venkatraman, said that, please don't take Amma with you today because she has got very high fever. She won't be able to perform. And we had a full sold out concert, 2,500 people in the Asian Games village in Delhi. Amma took 2 crossings and she said, I am coming. Nobody can stop me from singing in presence of Swami Chinmayananda. And Bharat Ratna MS Subbulakshmi, she came, she prostrated, and the performance she gave is perhaps one of the finest performances ever of her life. And later on at dinner, we were sitting with her and talking. She told me, Anilji, this was not me singing. Nothing happened because of me. She said, I and the music became one and the same.
Yeah.
And the teacher's presence and Swami Chinmayananda's presence just inspired me to go beyond my body, beyond my husband who was telling me, be careful, MS, and just beyond everything else. So extraordinary when the music and the musician become one and the same. I literally saw that happening. I saw that also with Bhipsen Joshi more than once. But with MS Subbulakshmi, particularly in the presence of the teacher, this was very, very divine experience, And so I always tell my friends and colleagues, I heard this term from a very interesting person a few years back. I said in every group, in every organization, in every team, we should have somebody who's not just in every conference. We should have somebody who's not just a keynote speaker, but we should have a keynote listener.
Yeah.
The keynote listener who is going to integrate all the wonderful things that have happened, which will bring out the best in each one of us. Yeah? So that's
It's
what. Yeah.
interesting that you use the 2 words key and note. Both
Yeah.
emanate from music.
Yes, that's
And
right.
that was very interesting to hear. Very briefly, if I might tell you, based on what you said, I must have been 13, 14, maybe 15, playing for the Rachmaninoff Prize at a British piano competition where I grew up. And I was so lost in the music that when I hit the second last bar, and I suddenly realized I'm reaching the end from another dimension, another world, I came back to reality and I lost my place and I stopped. And I won the competition despite and because of it, because the adjudicator realized that this is not a memory slip or a mistake, but the movement between the world we think we live in and the world in which I was that particular day. And we can talk more about that later. And my last question to you is, I work, as you know, in the development and social sector. across India, and we work in Africa as well. And I'm so grateful to my life in music, because one of the things I learned very quickly when I went into rural India is that you cannot impose what you conceive as development on most of the people, my beneficiaries that we have met. They have their own um, vibration and guide as to how they can lift themselves out of poverty. And it's only through listening to what their needs are and their hopes and dreams and their methodology and raison d'etre for moving from one dimension to another that we have been able to help them. Because we have modeled all our programs, most of them, all of them, around the needs of the beneficiaries, and shattered a myriad of things that we thought we would do and train them to repair phones and join Amazon and do this, all out the window. They have taught us and not us them. And I often wonder, if I didn't listen, would I have survived in this sector and made a success of it? So on that note, you have grown up in a culture which I have learned, although I didn't grow up here, is very competitive, perhaps because of the population in India, and very sort of marks oriented. And everyone is busy pulling everyone down and trying to get 99 and not 98. And business schools have become a fashion. I'm not sure that I'm a sort of lover of MBA programs, but you broke the mold. You're one of the first people I know in this country that distinctly moved away from traditional MBA programs, and you wanted a more tacit dimension. And that was a courageous thing to do. I mean, it could have fallen flat on its face, similar to, parallel to my experience in the social and development sector. So, of course, part of the tacit dimension is listening, and listening very carefully and developing skills that are tacit and not explicit. So, how and why did you come to do this? And I assume from reading your expression now that you're mighty glad that you did do it because of what you're giving to future generations.
Khurshid, it's just an experiment in higher education. And there are days I wake up and I say it's been a real blessing to have co-created soil and to have been chosen as the instrument to serve. And on the other days I wake up and say, oh my God, we have so much more to do. And, it's so challenging when we have a young recruiter who is barely out of school herself, who comes and asks questions, all trying to test students' knowledge and then telling us, oh, your students don't even know this. And, these kinds of things. And I say, wow. So I just really struggle with this notion of how people assess others without the slightest idea themselves about how to appreciate talent. And they are recruiters on behalf of big companies. So I think this competitiveness is real. This aspect that everybody wants to get ahead of the others in India is real. But beyond all this facade of competition and everything else, there is a real human being inside everybody who has a need to be deeply understood, appreciated, and loved. I think if you can confront students with their own freedom to make choices, if you can remind them about the greatness which is inside them, and if you can really make them stop the empty chatter of the mind. I have the book by Rumi lying here. My sister keeps gifting me books of the amazing poet Rumi. And, if they can just stop the empty chatter of their mind and just pay attention to their potential, which is far beyond the limitations of the body and mind. And when they identify with the real person inside, the real power of consciousness inside. So all our attempt is to, of course, start with the outward journey, with all this careers and placements and money and success, but then put the virus of soil inside them, which is this the journey of discovery, the journey of valuing themselves, and those kinds of questions. So that's what I would say. But I think it's something that it's a very, very challenging process. Inner transformation is not easy, and not everyone is ready for it. And only a very small percentage of students really go on an inner path. But if out of 100 students, even if 4 or 5 do that, I believe our job is done. Actually, that's the way I look at it. Yes. But I think we are coming to a close of the session, so perhaps. Yeah, it's already past time. I'm sorry we were not able to take more questions from the audience, but maybe we will do corrective action next time. Yes.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on to some questions, of course, not all of them, and it was indeed very enlightening to listen to Anil and the kind of questions that the audience and the panelists and my co-hosts here had for Anil. There's, I think, always a comma and never a full stop to learning, and I think we hope to come back to Anil one more day with a next part of the same kind of learning to understand more on observation and listening, and let's get better at what we do for the sake of what we do. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks Anil for listening, and thanks Anil for this enlightening session for all of us. Thank
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Khurshid.
Thank you.
Fantastic question. Thank you,
Thank
Deepa.
Thank
In
you.
your very deep question. Thank you, Rekha, from your perspective. Thank you, Vidya, for orchestrating the whole conversation. And thank each one
Thank
of
you.
the 50 people who joined to become co-travelers in today's conversation. Thank you very much. Thank
Thank you so much.
you.